I'm Angela Kelly Robeck, host of the Empowered Principal Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Jann Freed, PhD, and she is a leading development consultant and author. Her latest book, Breadcrumb Legacy, How Great Leaders Live a Life Worth Remembering, is a must-read. You're going to hear us talking about the importance of finding your purpose and understanding legacy. Oh, what a cool conversation. So much to learn. And by the way, before you go, it would be so cool if you went to my website, stephenmiletto.com/reviews, and left your thoughts about the podcast. Could you do that for me? That would be so cool. You know, that's how we get found in podcast land. And that's the easiest way. You can also do it on your app that you're listening to me on now. So could you take time to do that? Thanks so much. You are awesome. Enjoy the show.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Miletto. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. With Dr. Steve Miletto.
Jann Freed, PhD, is author of the new book, Breadcrumb Legacy, How Great Leaders Live a Life Worth Remembering, just published by Routledge. Based on in-depth interviews with leaders in business and non-business areas, Jann's book serves as a guide to leaving a trail of meaning throughout your life and career. Its inspirational and practical stories highlight how to live a life worth remembering. A leading development consultant and previously published author, Jann helps engage her client companies' employees as well as develop their leaders so as to support achievement of individual potential on a daily basis. Like a human GPS, Jann helps organizations and individuals get from where they are to today, where they want to be in the future, at every age and stage of life. Jann, thanks so much for joining me today. It's great to have you on the show, and say hi to everyone.
Well, hello, and thank you very much for inviting me as a guest.
Well, I'm glad you're here, and there's all kinds of cool stuff that you have in your background. And one of the things that you have done is you teach a graduate-level leadership course at the University of Iowa. Is there something that you consider a constant question that you find yourself addressing when working with graduate students?
Well, it's interesting. I teach one course a year, and so where I used to teach full-time. But one question I would say is, it always starts with self-awareness. You know, so many people end up in leadership positions. Now, my definition of a leader is someone who's in the position to influence the lives of others. So that's a very broad definition. It includes parents, teachers, coaches, pastors. So if you're in a position to influence the lives of others, you're in a leadership position. So it really starts with self-awareness. And what I have found in my 30 years of teaching and now almost 11 years of full-time consulting is that many people fall into leadership positions without really any preparation, without even thinking much about it. And so what they often do is rely on, well, what kind of leaders did they work under? And so sometimes, again, leadership doesn't have to be positive. Somebody can have a very negative. In fact, one of the questions I like to ask in workshops is, how many of you have worked under what you would consider to be a bad leader, negative influence, and the hands just fly up in the air? So I think, I would say self-awareness. It starts with the self.
That's awesome. It's, you're so right. I think a lot of times, people get afraid to ask, or, an opportunity is presented to them and they may not have had the training nor expected the opportunity to come there. And so they take a position, and the next thing you know is it's like, ooh, okay, now I got it. So what do I do?
Exactly. That's a problem.
Most definitely. You're a published author. Before we talk about the book that is now available, could you talk about your book, Leading with Wisdom, Sage Advice from 100 Experts, where you interview prominent leadership gurus such as Jim Autry, Marshall Goldsmith, Sally Hegelson, and Dan Pink, and Margaret Wheatley. Share a little bit about your focus with this book.
Okay. Well, that book, I was teaching full time and I had a sabbatical, and you have to have a research project when you're having a sabbatical. And so it's kind of interesting because it was around 2004, and Jim Collins was on a book tour. His book, Good to Great, had just come out. So I paid, and again, this is 2004. Maybe it doesn't seem like a lot of money now, but $100 a ticket just so that I could go listen to Jim Collins. But I wanted to hang around, so I wanted to ask him a question at the end. So I was like the last person in line. And I said, I'm going to have a sabbatical. I'd like to come. Can I shadow you? Can I come work with you? Can I be an apprentice? I want to learn from you. And he said, well, I've never been asked that question before. And long story short, he said, what I'll let you do is, why don't you call me and I'll give you an hour of my time. And so out of that hour, and at that point in time, he charged $5,000 an hour, but he didn't charge me. He said, I'll give you an hour of my time and you can just ask me questions. So out of that conversation, he said, there are a lot of leadership books out there, 7 principles of this, 5 habits of that. He said, everybody has their own kind of take on it, but who's synthesizing? Who's really making it meaningful? And he said, why don't you interview people and pull it together and really identify the themes? So that's what I did. I set out to do that like in 2004 and 5, kept working on it. And then when I left full-time teaching in 2011, I did a deep dive, and the book was published in 2013. And out of the research, each chapter is a major theme. And what I find interesting about this book is the theme that tended to resonate, Steve, with most people was the theme on leaders live their legacy. So then I started doing more research on legacy work, and then that led me to, my current book. But this whole idea of, when do we leave our legacy and what is a leadership legacy? And I've done workshops on this. So that really got people's attention. And then that kind of led to the next book.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. That's cool that you waited in line to ask Jim Collins that question. I'm impressed. That's good. That's so cool. So let's talk about you as a leader. I mean, do you have a main lesson that you learned that helped you be successful?
Well, what I would say is, it's easy to write about leadership. I find it easy to write about it, read about it, study it, teach it. I mean, I'm obsessed with it. When I left my full-time teaching job, I had an endowed chair in leadership and character development. And I just really love the whole idea of leadership, but it's another thing to practice it. It's hard. But what I find is, what I've learned is a lot of it is, leaders really need to understand that their job is to develop other leaders. Okay. So the leader, it's not really about the leader. It's how well are you developing others? And I often say leaders should clear obstacles and not be the obstacle. And again, in workshops, I'll say, how many of you have worked for a leader who was really the problem, the obstacle? And hands again, just shoot up in the air. And if you really want to be a good leader, it's kind of like getting out of the way, finding out what people need. And I say the most important question that leaders can ask is, how can I support you? How can I support you? And again, notice that it's open-ended. You never know what you're going to hear, and then get out of the way. Try to help them get what they need, and then get out of the way.
Oh, I love that. That's, because I've worked for a couple.
Have you worked for any bad leaders? Yeah.
Right.
Or leaders who were in the way. Yeah.
Right. Or at least they don't see themselves as having that role, which is unfortunate, because then you find yourself down the road having this gap that they probably easily could have helped you address by making sure you got a chance to meet Jim Collins, sure, or you got a chance to sit and ask questions, or be in some training that would have helped. Yes. As opposed to having the position and then going, this is an interesting one. I'm not sure I know how to do here. What a good point. One of the things that kind of leads me to is, so we talk about it, individual lesson. I mean, one of the things that, a leader needs to learn to be better at is how to lead an organization. So not just themselves or working with other people. What do you think, in leading an organization, a leader needs to learn a little bit about, or figure out, or what's that thing that kind of glares at you like that?
Well, you read about how leaders should do this, but I don't think many leaders do. And that is surround yourself with people who, compliment you so that you have a leadership team, just like, here we are in March Madness. The whole idea of it's fun, and I like basketball. So it's fun to look at, the teams that really work well together, that you can tell that, they have different strengths, but as a team, they're stronger than they are as individuals. And I think leaders, one of my chapters, well, I address this in both the Leading with Wisdom book, and then I have a chapter on it in my latest book this chapter is called Become a Nobody. But it's really about ego, that too much of our lives we're striving to be a somebody. And that's ego again. And when people are out for themselves, they're often threatened by other smart people or other people who might be able to do something better than they. And I would say that the strongest leaders understand, I need to have so-and-so on my team. I need, just like a coach, you would say, gosh, our point guard, is graduating from college, we need another point guard. And so, you want to have people who can play to their strengths in the right positions in order to build a strong leadership team. And I think that would be key is, if you've got a strong leadership team, the organization is just going to move in the right direction.
That's excellent. And it's funny because one of the things that you hear a lot about, and hopefully you pay attention to, is the idea that you're just talking about surrounding yourself with people who compliment or, I like the idea that some people say that are even, that are smarter than you. They have something that they're going to go after, and you, as opposed to the opposite, who's the leader who surrounds themselves with people that they feel like they can dominate over and know more than. So,
right.
I love that type of discussion, because I think that's, it's when you find people who are really go-getters and they have something they want to achieve and so forth. It's awesome what you can achieve with if you get out of the way.
I wrote 2 books with 2 different women, and both of them, ironically, are very detail-oriented. I'm more of a big picture, and so we just complemented each other so well. And both of them said they wouldn't have had the book without me, and I know I wouldn't have had the book without them. So, and it makes it more enjoyable if you can play to your strengths.
That's so awesome. It sure would. It sure would. If you can, as opposed to trying to fill in the gap. If you're not a detail-oriented person and you're trying to be, it can become miserable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Love it. So we're starting to get closer to talking a little bit about your latest book. So what I'd like to do is, as a lead-in, is oftentimes, and I heard you mention just briefly, something that is lacking is the thought about thinking in terms of legacy. The leader wants to live and leave behind. Could you talk about this? Talk about this thought about legacy. What are we talking about?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, as I said, my Leading with Wisdom book had a chapter that was a theme in the research where leaders live their legacy. And so in workshops, I would say, well, when do we leave our legacy? And people would say, well, when we leave. And I'd say, well, when we leave what? Well, when we leave a job, when we retire, we leave a career, when we die, when we leave the earth. And I would say, well, what about when I leave this workshop today? What about when we leave this conversation? So we're leaving our legacy all the time in bite-sized pieces. And then I came up with the phrase breadcrumb legacy, that we're leaving crumbs all the time. And I trademarked that concept. And that really resonates with people because I think it can be, again, legacy is not for the rich and famous. It's not for the end of life because we don't know when the end is. So therefore, breadcrumb legacy can be like your guiding light. It can be your true north. It can be your North Star. It can really kind of keep you on the right path if you're thinking about, I'm having an impact on people all the time. It may not be the impact I want to have if I'm not thinking about it, if I'm not intentional. And so that's where I'm coming with this concept. And, legacy has really become kind of magnified, Steve, given COVID, because COVID was so devastating, and people, the millions of people dying, and industries dying, and companies dying, and jobs disappearing. I mean, people were experiencing just significant loss, large and small, over and over and over. And so legacy, I think death became front and center. And then people started thinking about, well, what's the meaning of life? And what do I want to be doing? And is this how I want to spend my time? I mean, I think COVID, when the world kind of shut down, gave people a time to pause and reset and reboot and really rethink how they want to live their lives. And legacy, emerged. And, for athletes, they tend to age out of their profession much earlier than the rest of us. So, Roger Federer, I'm a Roger Federer fan, and he'd been asked for years, when's Roger going to retire? When's Roger going to retire? What's his legacy and what's he want his legacy to be? And what I really liked is Serena, what I really liked when she retired, because I have a podcast called Becoming a Sage. And I say that I'm out to retire the word retirement, because we're not retiring, but we're moving on. And what are we moving on to? And that takes some time and intentional thought. And I really liked when Serena she said, I'm not retiring, I'm evolving away from tennis.
Nice.
And I really like that phrase. What are we, because evolving implies growth, that I'm continuing to grow, but I'm going to grow maybe away from what I was doing before, or maybe it's related. But so this whole idea of legacy, because of COVID, has become even more important. I think people are really thinking about, what difference am I making? And I often quote Jane Goodall, the anthropologist, and she says, we're all making a difference. What kind of difference do you want to make? And so I think legacy ties a lot of that all together.
That's nice. That's it's such a big deal, because in the past, it's the idea of retiring simply meant that we're going to give you a party, you're going to get a gold watch, a pin, or something like that, and we're going to say goodbye, and maybe it's going to be a life of fishing or whatever your world's going to bring to you. And I like it's cool what you're talking about is like what Serena said, is that figure something else out. And and it's funny because Federer's been around for a long time, and part of it, I could see him taking time to kind of figure things out or do something he's always wanted to do that he couldn't do while he's on the circuit. But then then you see him reappearing somehow. So
yeah, exactly. Well, I miss watching him play. So
yeah, he was amazing. That was there's some of them, because just as a note, long time ago, one of my favorite memories is I got a chance to see an event that was done for I'm trying to remember what AT&T sponsored this event, and by the way, they don't sponsor this podcast, so I'm just but they sponsored the this tennis event, and it was one of those things that was done for some sort of charity that they were giving the money to, and two of the star liners that they had were from the past, and it was McEnroe and Jimmy Connors, and it was hilarious because they were still in their great form, and if you ever watched McEnroe play, you never knew when the tennis racket's going to be thrown on the ground, or he's going to get mad at the chair or something. Yeah. And so he and Jimmy obviously staged a few of these, which much to the crowd's loving it. Because it was cool. It was inside an indoor arena, and they had filled everything in there, and it was never forget that. But it's funny because in recent times, although more recent audiences may not understand, I've seen McEnroe appear on commercials where they go and he just makes a brief appearance where he's blowing up about something. So it's funny. He's found a different way of retiring as well.
That's true.
So I thought that was interesting. With Breadcrumb Legacy, how great leaders live a life worth remembering. Are there some themes that you kind of found as you talked with these different leaders and such? Is there something that you kind of want to share with us that they'll find when a reader gets your book?
Yeah, exactly. Well, again, the chapters are themes, and I used, I was engaged in qualitative research, which just means I interviewed people and then identified themes. And so, one theme is purpose, that in order to really live a life worth remembering, people have to have a purpose and a meaning. And it doesn't have to be with a big P. It could be with a little p. What's going to get you out of bed in the morning? I say to people, particularly if they've read, I think it's important at any age and any stage. And notice that I have leader in the subtitle, but I say the most important person to lead is yourself. So, that's why this book is really for anybody and everybody. So at any age, you need to be thinking about, what's my purpose? If it's really hard to get out of bed in the morning, you're probably not engaged in whatever it is you're doing, and, look for something else. So, but again, I encourage people to discover, explore, try things out. But it really does help to have something that kind of lights your fire. Okay. And then another chapter's on death and dying. It's called Embracing Death. And I actually had a TEDx talk on this called Embracing Death, Seeing Life Through a Different Lens. And I would just say that if this interests your listeners at all, they could find it on YouTube, either by searching my name and TEDx or remembering the title, Embracing Death. But it's about, really thinking about when you embrace death and you're freer to live. And there's all kinds of research on this that, we don't know when the end is. So that's why, we need to be thinking about what difference are we making today, because we don't know. Things can happen overnight, accidents. Somebody was telling me how his brother just, I think he said he was 52, just heart attack gone, So, again, this whole idea of embracing death makes you really think about, am I living life in the way that I want? I mentioned earlier becoming nobody, which is just about controlling your ego, not letting your ego get out of control. And I think a lot of toxic environments get created by leaders who are just letting their ego run their life. Another chapter is on relationships. If I've done a lot of research on happiness and longevity and all of this. And well, first of all, people who have a purpose tend to live 7.5 years longer than those who don't. People who have a companion through life also live longer and tend to live healthier lives. So this whole idea of relationship, if I had to summarize all of the happiness research into one word, I would say it's relationship. That somebody on their deathbed, isn't usually saying, oh, I should have gotten that promotion, or I wish I would have taken a different job. No, they're really thinking about, are my relationships in order? And, relationships, connection is protection. And so, and what happens as we get older is, people retire, move away. Some people die. We've had some friends. My husband's best friend just died about a month ago from a blood cancer. People die, move away, retire. Some friends, don't reciprocate, don't want to put any energy into it. Our circle of friends tends to shrink. And there's all kinds of research that says intergenerational learning, mentor somebody, let somebody else teach you something, this whole idea of, give and take and live and learn. So relationships are critical. And then I've got, clearly a chapter on legacy. So those are kind of the main themes that emerge, that if you really want to live a life worth remembering, I would say another key word is be intentional. Be thinking about, how do you want to be remembered, and then live your life that way. And the earlier you understand that, the better off you are.
That's so awesome, because, it really is something that, when you work with kids, a lot of them, they think that they got to find their purpose right now. And it's like, let's live life a little bit and figure out what you want to do. But I know a lot of adults who then the same thing, they have never really thought about it. And so they're just kind of living whatever life has brought them, as opposed to living some plan. And I think it's interesting what you talk about, because I think a lot of the idea of having some sort of purpose, that you keep that connection, you keep that drive, or whatever it is that you're going to do, or that drives you, I guess, is the point.
Yeah. And I think two other key words are to stay relevant and to stay engaged. So relevant just means, stay current. That doesn't mean you need to know everything about everything else. But what happens is some people withdraw, and, they then become kind of isolated. And if you're not having conversations, there's, again, a whole body of research on lots of people want to age in place, which just means I want to stay in my own home as long as I can. And the research would say that's not really that healthy, because if you're not getting out and about, people aren't coming, you're not really interacting, you're not socializing. That's why you see, well, clearly there are retirement communities, but they're also, like in cities, or even in my city, I'm in Des Moines, Iowa, which is the capital, but we're seeing more and more kind of fancy apartments, lofts being made where people are downsizing, but it's kind of like going back to college again. You're like in a dorm environment where, they have parties, they're socializing, they have gatherings, and I think all that's very healthy.
That's awesome. It is something that, you talk about, like in my world. I'm in education. I work with lots of different types of leaders. But if you talk about the principals and the assistant superintendents and such, one of the things that happens in education is that they get to a point where they may not know what they're going to do next. And they start thinking about, and I would think this is in all career fields. It's kind of like, even when you're talking about, if we talk about a tennis star, you see this a lot with athletes who are high paid, where they don't know when to retire, and you wonder if it's because they're really kind of afraid of it. That what do I do next? All I've been doing is doing this stuff. It gives me purpose. It makes me know what comes next. And so, what happens if nobody wants me anymore?
Very true. I think a lot of athletes really struggle. And, think about gymnasts, they often age out at 18 or,
yes.
So, I think a lot of people really struggle, especially when that's all they've been doing since probably age 5 or, and they do struggle and blow a lot. You see a lot of sad stories about professional athletes.
It's sad because they got all the attention. And I'm talking about big name ones who have all the attention and all the money, and then they start making some poor decisions, which is like,
right.
You just wonder if it's because they're afraid of, letting go, or can I make something else happen, or what if people don't want to see me anymore? And, and it's that type of thing. And it happens in my world. One of the things that happens is it's a kind of common thing to see someone who used to be in some leadership position now selling yearbooks or selling rings or working with construction companies and that type of thing. And it's, and that it's part of trying to figure out how to keep some sort of connection going.
Sure. Yeah, I know. Well, that's why I say it a lot of people, especially if they're set for money, then it's really easy to withdraw, and just all of a sudden it's like they disappear. Like, what happened to them?
Right.
So I think it's really important to be thinking about these concepts. And I often say when people I'd say it takes about 5 years to really kind of make a transition. Some people do encore careers. I tend to define work as contribution. So, how might you continue to contribute to the world or contribute to causes that are important to you? And you can do that as a volunteer. You could do it part-time. I'm actually in an encore career. So, which I like a lot, and, but I still have kind of freedom and flexibility as to how I spend my time, which is a gift.
That's so awesome. That's, one of the things that leads me to is a question about, when you get upwards in age, you start questioning whether, am I done? and as we're talking about legacy and so forth, I mean, the whole question about whether I'm done or is there more in the tank? I don't, I can describe this in many different ways, but I'm going to describe it in that way. Like there's a trainer of leaders that I like listening to. He talks about give it one more, and he talks about it in terms of like if you're in the gym and you're bench pressing or you're doing some exercise and you try and give it one more. And one of the things that I like to think about is that sometimes I think we get to that point where it's like, do I have one more? Do I have the ability to do one more? Or that in the, whatever role that I'm playing, can I've been able to do this. Now I seem to, I've kind of flattened out. Is it possible that I could get re-energized by doing that one more someplace else or something? I don't know if you've run into that as you talk about this or.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to how I define work. That I would look at it like, how might I contribute? I have a personal mission statement, and my mission statement is I want to continue to learn and share what I'm learning through others. So I do that through writing. I have a column in Training Magazine, both in print and online, that I write for every issue. Sometimes I write for a local publication. Writing these books. I mentioned I have a monthly podcast. I also have a monthly newsletter. So if your listeners like anything they've heard today, they could go to my website, which is jannfreed.com, 2 N's and 2 E's, and they can subscribe to my monthly newsletter. I actually have one coming out tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow. Where and it's easy to read. It's not long, and the people can follow me on LinkedIn. But, how might you, I guess I would advise your listeners to say, okay, what skills do I have? What really, energizes me? And then where might I contribute those skills, that energy? And it could be to a volunteer cause. It could be, to a not-for-profit. But I would encourage people to look for something that kind of is part of a community. Doesn't have to be faith-based, but, a group where the group gets together. And so you have that interaction, you have that intergenerational learning back and forth.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's excellent. I appreciate you talking about that. It's one of the things that
we're never done, Steve. We're never done.
I like that. I really do. And I think that's something that sometimes we have to convince others that we're never done. But
and, I do think that leadership it does have a shelf life. I don't think it's good to, I could have continued to stay in my full-time teaching job because I was tenured and all of that. But I just felt like I wanted to do something else before I was really too old to do it. And I wanted to give somebody else the opportunity to do what I was doing. So I don't think we're ever done.
I love that. That's awesome. I need to put that above my door as I walk out so I can read it as I go out. Or
you're
something.
Not done. Yeah,
not done. Love that. Jan, what could someone expect if they engaged you as a coach? What might that work out? What do you do? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I tend to look at before COVID, most of my clients were local, and so we would meet in person. But now I do most of the coaching on Zoom. So, around the country, it doesn't have my clients are not just local anymore. And there's kind of what I would call a little bit of homework, but we start off with, again, self-awareness. And as I said, I developed my mission statement by kind of going through this coaching process. So this whole idea of, we talk about values and how do you want to live the rest of your life? And one of the things that I often do with coaching clients is I will often coach 2 for the price of 1. And what I mean by that is if someone's in a significant relationship, I think it's really important to have that partner person on the same page. And so I will say that, you can bring your significant other. I can coach both of you for the price of 1 because I want you to have these facilitated conversations. Because what I find is I was doing a workshop a couple years ago, and this was in person. Actually, it was right before COVID. So it was in person, and after the workshop, and it was called Beyond Money, Beyond the Money, because I created these workshops. So much of retirement planning is focused on financial. Are you financially set to retire?
Right.
And I created these workshops that are focused on the non-financial aspect of retirement. Are you ready for everything else? If you've got the money in place, are you ready? Are you prepared for beyond the money? And a VP of the biggest hospital in town, hospital center, came up to me afterwards and he said, "Jann, I'm telling you," he said, "I'm 68 years old. My wife and I, we know we've got to be close to retirement." But he said, "All I've ever done my whole life is work. We only have one grandchild. We talk about spending time with the grandchild." But he said, "We've never had conversations about how we want to live the rest of our life." And he said, "I'm 68. And I said, "Well, it's time to have those conversations." And so anyway, he was telling me how, he really, really found the workshop helpful. So I think that's important, to really, envision how do you want to spend your time and your all your resources, time, money, energy. And how does that look like if you're in a relationship? How does that affect the other person? I'm sure you've heard the old joke, "I married you for better, for worse, but not for lunch."
Nice. Nice.
And so, it really, you hear people say all the time, "Gosh, this was a real adjustment. I wasn't used to having him around all the time," And so I married you for better, for worse, but not for lunch.
I love that. That's awesome because in my world, I've been working where I drove and lived in another community that was a couple hours away. Because it was easier just to stay there, so that I had this advancement. And I did that for 8 years, and I had an opportunity to come back and be near home in a position where I could drive home at night. And so my wife and I talked about it, and I could have stayed, but I said this is probably a good time in my life to do this, to make this adjustment. Well, we had to have this conversation, and it was funny because my wife said to me, she goes, "I don't cook every night." And I said, "Yes, I know." I said, "I also need you to know that I've been eating soup out of a can pretty much, microwaving it every night." And so we've had that adjustment that you're talking about, which is to say, in our case, it wasn't lunch, it was, dinner and being in the house at night, because she was used to having, Sunday through Thursday night to herself.
Right.
So, but
yeah, it's an adjustment. It's an adjustment.
That it is. So good stuff. Jann, I know you mentioned a couple of those things, but if you could repeat again some of the places that if someone wanted to follow up and connect with you, where's the best place for them to go? Because I'll put them in my show notes.
Sure. Well, the best place is my website, jannfreed.com, 2 N's and 2 E's. And as I said, I have a monthly, if a person subscribes, you would get a monthly newsletter and a monthly podcast. And again, I said the newsletter is easy to read. And what I do is I try to focus on sharing what I'm learning. And so I talk about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what I'm thinking. And so, and the other place, a good place to find me is LinkedIn. I share a lot of things on LinkedIn. And I'm also on Instagram. I'm picking up the pace on Instagram. I was a little late to the game, but I'm having some fun on Instagram. So again, just search for Jann Freed. I do a little bit on Twitter, but not much. And Facebook. I am on Facebook. I actually have a private Facebook group called Becoming a Sage that someone can request to be a member. And I only post in that Facebook group. I encourage the community. The whole focus is on kind of positive aging, conscious aging. So that's a focus there in that private Facebook group. And I talk about that in my newsletter too. So I would love it if people would, if I've said anything interesting, I hope you'll look for more.
Awesome. And I will put information in the show notes, links and so forth, so they can come find you, and good stuff. I
will say that on my website, I do have a 20% discount from the publisher for my latest book. And I would encourage people, if they're interested in the book, to use that discount, because I don't know. The book is a little pricey, and so I would encourage people to use a discount. So
excellent, awesome. So just remind everybody that if you go purchase their book, you got a chance for that 20% discount. So good stuff. So I'll put those links in my show notes. So that'll be awesome. So people can come find you. And I got last two questions for you, Jann, before we finish up. And they're questions that I like to ask my guests. And the first one is, how do you keep going when so much is going on that you may want to quit?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think it goes back to that purpose again, that, I wake up and it's like, oh gosh, I've got all these things that excite me that I want to be involved in, and I mentioned relationships. I think it's important who you hang around, because it influences kind of your lifestyle. And so you want to hang around positive, healthy people, find the organization that where they are. And because I think that influences how you feel.
Love it. Awesome. And last question, do you have a teacher in your past who made a difference in your life? If so, who was it? And what would you say if given the chance to say thank you?
I do. And I have a perfect example, because I wouldn't have any of my books if it weren't for Dr. Elmer Burak. And Elmer, I've dedicated the newest book and the last book, Leading with Wisdom, to Elmer. And I even have the last chapter in my book, A Breadcrumb Legacy, is chapter 8, What Would Elmer Do?
Nice.
And I talk all about Elmer. And he just influenced me in such a positive way. And so he definitely is a role model. I think of him all the time. He died in 2012 and he was 82. So, but I still think of Elmer, and we had so many conversations that I can ask myself, what would Elmer do? What advice would he give me? And something comes to mind. So, and I thanked him all the time. In fact, he would say, Jann, you don't have to thank me anymore. I used to say he was my Tuesdays with Maury. He was my Maury.
Yes, yes.
He'd say, Jann, you don't have to thank me. You thank me enough. You don't have to remember my birthday. You don't. I said, I need to remember you every time I have, every chance I have. So that's it. That's the easiest question I can answer for you today, Steve.
That's awesome. I love that answer. Thank you so much. Jann, thanks so much for talking with me. I love your focus. Your book, Breadcrumb Legacy, How Great Leaders Live a Life Worth Remembering, is powerful. And I love that concept of looking at people's legacy and their purpose. I'm wishing you the best in all you do.
Thank you very much.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.